Hello, thank you for listening. My name is Pierre Dubois, and I want to tell you a story from a time when I was just 24 years old, a lifetime ago. Before the war, my world had a rhythm you could set your watch to. It was the rhythm of the great stamping press at the factory in Lyon. Clang, hiss. It smelled of hot oil, shaved steel, and the sweat of honest work. I was a factory man, you see. I understood how things fit together. I believed that every problem had a solution, that even the most broken, grinding machine could be coaxed back to life with the right tools, a bit of patience, and a clear head. Everything had a place, a purpose, a logical sequence. You pull this lever, that gear turns, this part moves. Simple, predictable, safe. The war taught me that nothing is simple. It taught me that some machines are designed only to break other things, and that the most important parts can't be fixed with a wrench. People ask what it was like to leave occupied France and join the fight. They imagine a grand moment of decision, a speech about liberty. But for me, the real war didn't start in a recruitment office. It started in a slit trench dug into the unforgiving sand of Egypt, thousands of kilometers from home. It began as most terrible things do, not with a bang, but with a whisper. A whisper from a world I was no longer a part of, carried on a piece of paper so thin you could almost see through it. The desert has no memory. It swallows everything. The sun bleaches the bones of men and machines to the same anonymous white. It was October 1942, Alamein. The name itself felt dry and cracked on the tongue. My world had been reduced to the color of dust. Khaki uniform, tan sand, beige sky hazed with heat and smoke. The only other color was the angry red of artillery blossoms on the horizon at night, or the dark, flies buzzing slick of oil and blood. My life, once governed by the factory whistle, was now dictated by the shriek of a Stuka or the bark of a sergeant. The logical clang and hiss were gone, replaced by the insane percussion of war. The rhythmic crack of our levels, the stuttering cough of the German machine guns, the deafening, earth-shaking roar of the artillery barrage they called the Devil's Orchestra. It was a symphony of chaos, a machine built to unmake itself and everything around it. My old skills felt useless here. You can't diagnose a broken tank when it's on fire. You can't recalibrate a man's spirit when it's been shaken loose by a near miss from an 88. My thoughts were stripped gears, grinding uselessly against the horror of it all. To survive, you had to shut down the part of you that thought, that remembered. I tried to forget the smell of rain on the cobblestones of the Croix-House. I tried to block out the memory of my mother's coq au vin, the taste of real bread, not the hardtack that would crack a tooth. I tried to become a simple part in this new machine. Load, aim, fire, reload, that was my function. A human cog, it was the only way to keep from breaking completely. One afternoon, the sun was a hammer overhead, beating down on our helmets. The air was thick with the metallic tang of cordite and the sweet, sick smell of death. A lull in the fighting, a dangerous silence where you could hear your own heart pounding in your ears, hear the flies buzzing around the rim of your canteen. A supply lorry, wheezing and rattling like an old man's chest, came churning up the track behind our position, kicking up a plume of fine dust that coated everything, got in your eyes, your throat, the action of your rifle. I was cleaning my rifle, the familiar, methodical movements a small comfort, a connection to my old life of ordered tasks. A corporal named Jean-Luc, a Parisian with eyes that had seen too much, slid down into the trench beside me. He didn't say a word, just pushed a folded, grimy piece of paper into my hand. "Came in with the ammunition," he grunted before moving on. It was thin, almost weightless, but it felt heavier than a grenade in my palm. The post from home was a dangerous miracle. It took months, smuggled across lines, passed from brave hand to brave hand. A single letter was a thread spun across a continent, a lifeline that could just as easily become a noose. To receive one was a blessing and a curse, because news from occupied France was never good. I unfolded it slowly. My hands, calloused and stained with grease and sand, trembled. It was from Élise, my little sister. Her handwriting, usually so neat and precise, a schoolgirl's perfect script, was a frantic scrawl, the pencil pressed so hard it had nearly torn the cheap paper. The world outside my trench disappeared. The heat, the flies, the distant crump of mortars, all of it faded to a dull hum. "Mon cher frère Pierre," she began. My heart seized. She never called me that. It was always Pierrot. The formality was a slap. "I hope this finds you well and safe. We pray for you, all of us." Her words were a window, and through them I saw not the endless sand, but the narrow street of our home in Lyon. I could see her at our small kitchen table, chewing the end of her pencil, the light from the window catching the worried frown on her face. A sensory ghost. I could almost smell the faint scent of lavender from the soap Mammon always used. Things here are difficult. The bread is mostly sawdust now, and Mammon lines up for hours for a few potatoes. She tries to be brave for us, but I see her at night. She cries when she thinks no one is looking. Papa says we must endure. He hides the radio better now after they took Monsieur Renaud from across the street. The gears in my mind stopped grinding. They froze solid. Sawdust. They were feeding my family sawdust. I looked at the half-eaten biscuit in my hand, the bland, hard army ration I'd been cursing moments before. It felt like a feast, a sickening, guilty feast. The worst is the SDO, the compulsory labor service. They came to the factory. They took Jean from 2 doors down. His mother, Pierre, she screamed. They just pushed her aside and put him on the truck. He is only 17. They are sending our boys to Germany to work in their factories to build their weapons. Every day we watch the street, terrified the next notice will be for Papa or for you if you were here. My breath caught. A cold dread, colder than any desert night, crept into my bones. This wasn't a war of front lines and battle plans anymore. It was a war of kitchen tables, of empty cupboards, of notices nailed to the door. My reason for being here, the grand idea of liberating France, suddenly felt like a hollow, abstract thing. France wasn't a map or a flag. It was my mother, weeping silently in the dark. It was my father, risking his life to listen to a crackling broadcast from London. It was my sister, writing this letter, her fear staining the very paper. A shell screamed overhead. I didn't flinch. A burst of machine gun fire rattled from the German lines. I didn't hear it. The factory man in me was screaming. This was a broken machine, my family, my home, and I was thousands of kilometers away with my useless tools. My rifle could kill a German soldier over there on that ridge, but it couldn't put bread on my family's table. It couldn't stop a bureaucrat with a list from knocking on our door. The logic I had clung to shattered into a million pieces. There was no lever to pull, no gear to turn that could fix this. I was a soldier, trained to fight an enemy I could see. But the true enemy was a creeping, invisible rot of hunger and fear, and it was devouring my family from the inside out. The guilt was a physical weight. It pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Every moment I was here, surviving, eating my rations, I was failing them. My quiet determination curdled into a cold, black rage, a rage born of total helplessness. Jean-Luc slid back beside me. "You all right, Dubois?" I couldn't speak. I just folded the letter, the paper soft and fragile as a moth's wing, and tucked it into the breast pocket of my tunic. It lay against my heart, burning. He nodded, understanding without asking. "They're forming up," he said, pointing his chin towards the ridge. "Looks like they're coming again." I picked up my rifle. It felt different in my hands, heavier, more personal. Before, the men on the other side were a concept, the Boche. An obstacle. Now I saw their faces, not as individuals, but as a single entity. They were the reason for the sawdust in the bread. They were the reason my mother cried. They were the notice on the door, the truck that took Jean away. My function had changed. I was no longer just a cog in the Allied war machine. I was Élise's brother. I was my mother's son. The factory man in me was dead. I was no longer trying to fix a broken world. I was just trying to destroy the part that had broken my family. I rested the rifle on the sandbags, took aim, and for the first time I wasn't fighting for France. I was fighting for a loaf of bread, and my rage made my hands perfectly steady. I went back to the factory after the war. The great machines were still there, patched up and running. The rhythms returned, clang, hiss, but I never saw them the same way again. I had learned that the most important machines are not made of steel and oil. They are made of people, of families, of cities, of countries. And when they break, when they truly break, the pieces never quite fit back together in the same way. You can weld the cracks, you can bolt on new parts, but you can always see the scars. You can always feel the imbalance. That letter changed my war. It gave me a reason to hate, and that hate kept me alive through the blood and fire of North Africa, of Italy, of the liberation of our homeland. But it also left a permanent crack in my own machinery. It taught me the hardest lesson of all. People talk about fighting for grand ideas, for liberty, for honor, for the nation, and we did. But in the deepest, most desperate moments, in a trench with the sun trying to cook you alive, you don't fight for a flag. You fight for the memory of bread baking in your mother's oven. You fight for a sister's worried handwriting. You fight because you are 1,000 miles away, and pulling a trigger is the only thing you can do to scream your love and your rage across the distance. The greatest burden a soldier carries isn't his pack or his rifle. It's the life he left behind, the one he is powerless to protect. I still have that letter. The paper is yellowed and brittle like a ghost, This memory is a piece of shrapnel I carry. It's heavy. Help me carry it. Subscribe and ensure these stories are never left to rust in silence.